Hey everyone, tonight we're going to talk about a different kind of monster. This one doesn't have claws or hide under your bed. It finds you on a beautiful beach, looks you in the eyes, and tells you everything you've ever wanted to hear. Imagine this. You're a brilliant surgeon, you're intelligent, educated, and you have built a life of success and experience in Europe. Then, in the blink of an eye, you lose it all, not to a stock market crash, not to a freak accident, but to three simple words: I love you. This is the story of a systematic deception, a meticulously engineered industry of heartbreak, and a woman who was nearly destroyed by it. This is a story that is more shattering than you think, and its chilling logic lies far closer to your own reality than you can possibly imagine. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I find it endlessly fascinating to see where we all are in the world. Now dim the lights, maybe put on a fan for some gentle white noise, and let's embark on tonight's journey together. Our story starts not in some tropical paradise, but in the cold, gray heart of a Berlin winter in 2019. Picture a woman, let's call her Dr. Anna Muller, sitting on the floor of her nearly empty apartment. The only furniture left is a few cardboard boxes, monuments to a life she's dismantling. She's staring at her phone, at the banking app that shows a balance of just 347 euros. That's it. The last remnant of a life filled with success. This is a woman with a doctorate, a celebrated trauma surgeon who has spent decades putting people back together. And here she is, completely broken. Not because of a risky bet on some crypto coin, not because of a failed business idea, but because of love. Or at least what she thought was love. How could I be so dumb? It's a question that's been looping in her mind for months, a cruel mantra on repeat. But that same question is being asked by hundreds, thousands of intelligent, successful women all across Europe. They are all victims of a meticulously crafted scam, a con as old as human desire and as modern as the Wi-Fi that delivers the lies directly to your heart. The numbers alone are staggering. According to Germany's Federal Criminal Police Office, the BKA, there were over 8,900 registered cases of this so-called romance scam in 2023 alone. That's a 46% jump from the year before. The financial damage, over 185 million euros, and that's just what's reported. The real number is believed to be astronomical, hidden by the deep, suffocating shame that victims feel. Anna's story doesn't begin with some shadowy criminal mastermind. It begins with a yearning we all know, a fundamental human ache for connection, for safety, for that one person who finally gets you. For Anna, that ache was carved into her from childhood. She grew up in Hamburg, the daughter of two doctors. In her house, success wasn't just encouraged, it was the baseline expectation. Perfection was the air she breathed. I was always the best at everything, she would later recall, but I never felt loved for it. Her father, a renowned heart surgeon, was a ghost in her life, rarely home. Her mother, an internist, was present physically but was fighting her own battles with burnout, depression, and a quiet, steady reliance on alcohol. It's funny how a household can be filled with people who heal others for a living and yet be so devoid of healing itself. This emotional chill shaped Anna. She did what was expected. She became a doctor, just like them. She specialized in the high-stakes world of trauma surgery, working her way up to the demanding position of chief resident. She was a master of the golden hour, that critical window to save a life. But in her own life, the golden hour had seemingly come and gone. She was brilliant in the operating room, but lonely outside of it. 3 long-term relationships, all with fellow doctors, had all crumbled for the same reasons. Not enough time, not enough attention, not enough real, honest intimacy. Their idea of a romantic evening was debating the merits of different suture techniques. By the time she was 49, Anna was profoundly exhausted. The hospital was consuming her. The endless night shifts were grinding her down, and the soul-crushing bureaucracy was a special kind of German-engineered torture. I was saving lives every day, she described, but I was losing my own in the process. Then came the pandemic. It acted as an accelerant, pouring gasoline on the fire of her burnout. More work, more stress, and an even deeper, more profound isolation. Anna was a hero of the system, applauded on balconies, yet she had never felt more invisible. Even the ancient philosophers knew that a life lived only for duty is a gilded cage. You might be admired, but you're still trapped. The collapse finally came in the autumn of 2021. A full-blown burnout accompanied by a severe depression that felt like a black hole had opened up inside her chest. She was put on medical leave for months. Anna, the woman who had spent a lifetime helping others, was now utterly incapable of helping herself. I would just sit in my apartment and have no idea who I was anymore, she remembered. My entire identity was tied to my job. Without it, I was nothing. The constant need to perform, to fix, to be the strong one. That's a classic example of what academics now call emotional labor, and Anna had been paying that tax her entire life with no one to pay it back to her. And then, a flicker of an idea that would change everything. Sri Lanka, an Ayurveda cure. She booked it on a whim, a desperate act. Those 4 weeks felt like a miracle. For the first time in years, I could actually sleep, Anna recalled. The air was warm, scented with salt and jasmine. The food was vibrant, but most importantly, the people. They were so warm, so attentive. I finally felt seen. She didn't realize it then, but that profound emotional emptiness, that desperate need to be seen, was exactly what made her the perfect prey. She was a ship, lost in a storm, searching for any lighthouse at all, no matter what rocks it might be guiding her toward. Sri Lanka was no longer just a vacation spot for Anna. It had become an obsession, a remedy for a sickness she felt deep in her bones. After that first miraculous Ayurveda cure, she went back again and again. In the space of 2 years, she made 5 separate trips. The tropical paradise seemed to offer everything that Germany, her home, refused her. Warmth, not just from the sun, but from the people, a sense of genuine connection, a feeling of healing. With every return flight to Berlin, the alienation grew. In Germany, I felt like a robot, Anna described. Function, work, sleep. But live? I had forgotten how to do that. And her friends back home started to joke, asking if she was trying to set a world record for most flights to Colombo, or if she'd simply developed a serious addiction to cinnamon. The cruelest part was how her body kept score. The insomnia, vanquished by the gentle Sri Lankan nights, would return the moment her feet touched the tarmac at Brandenburg Airport. Her life had become a grim, predictable cycle. Grind herself down to exhaustion in Germany, flee to Sri Lanka for a brief, desperate gasp of air, return to the cold reality and collapse all over again. The statistics grimly have her back. Germany has one of the highest rates of burnout in the world, and the demographic most affected? Women in the healthcare sector between the ages of 45 and 55. It was as if Anna wasn't just a person. She was a perfect textbook case study. A walking embodiment of a societal problem. This constant back and forth, this spiritual tug-of-war couldn't last. The ancient Greeks had a word, nostos, for the profound ache one feels to return home. For Anna, it was the opposite. She was suffering from an ache to be anywhere but home. Something had to give. Then, one evening, as she sat in her silent Berlin apartment, her phone buzzed with a WhatsApp message that seemed to be the solution to everything. It was from a hotel owner in Marissa, a man whose resort she had stayed at twice before. The message was casual, friendly, and devastatingly effective. Anna, it read with a smiling emoji. Hope you are well in cold Germany. I have an idea for you. We need a German guest relations manager for my beach resort. You know our country, you know our culture, you speak the language of the guests. It is perfect. Anna didn't hesitate for long. It felt like the universe was finally throwing her a lifeline. Her medical practice in Berlin? Already given up. Her apartment? The lease was already terminated. All that remained of her old life was a handful of boxes filled with memories, stored at a friend's house, the only anchor she had left to her past. She saw it as a grand new beginning, but what was meant to be a fresh start quickly devolved into a nightmare. The reality of the job was a far cry from the breezy WhatsApp message. The hotel owner, once so friendly when she was a paying guest, now treated her like a third-class employee. Her salary was paid irregularly, if at all. He piled all the unpleasant, difficult tasks onto her, from dealing with angry customers to plumbing issues, and the promised private room. It was a cramped, windowless hole next to the kitchen, perpetually smelling of grease and old spices, with the clatter of pots and pans as her constant soundtrack. I was at the absolute bottom, she recalled. My dream of paradise had burst. I had nothing. No job, no real home, and absolutely no perspective. She had traded a life of prestigious misery for one of cheap, humid misery, and it was right there in that moment of absolute despair that he walked into her life. His name was Lakshan. He was 35 years old, with a smile that could disarm armies and a gentle, attentive way of listening that felt like a balm on her raw nerves. And crucially, he spoke German. He owned a small, charming restaurant right on the beach in Hikkaduwa. He didn't approach her with a clumsy pickup line. He simply found her one evening, sitting alone, looking out at the ocean with the weight of the world on her shoulders, and offered her a cup of tea. He listened as she poured out her story of the disastrous hotel job, of her burnout, of her disillusionment. He nodded, he understood, he validated every feeling. He seemed to be the answer to every prayer she had ever whispered into the void. Finally, she thought, her heart soaring with a hope she hadn't felt in years. Someone who actually sees me. My soulmate. What she couldn't possibly know was that Lakshan had years of practice. He was an expert at spotting the specific shimmer of desperation that clung to lonely European women. He wasn't a savior. He was a predator with perfect timing. What he was doing is a textbook psychological tactic, a deluge of affection and validation that is designed to overwhelm your natural defenses and critical thinking. In academic circles, this is a well-documented element of what is called love bombing. It's an intentional, manipulative strategy to create a powerful sense of connection and dependency in a very short amount of time. And for a woman like Anna, who was starved of genuine recognition, it was more potent than any drug. He was reflecting her own soul back at her, and she was falling in love with the reflection. It's a bit like how certain species of fireflies can mimic the mating flash of other species, luring them in only to devour them. It's a brutal but effective strategy found throughout the natural world.
4 weeks. That's all it took. 4 weeks of shared sunsets, long conversations, and the intoxicating feeling of being the absolute center of someone's universe. For Anna, who had felt invisible for years, it was a lifetime, and at the peak of this intense emotional high, Lakshan made the offer of a lifetime. "Let's run the restaurant together," he said one evening, his voice earnest as they sat on the still warm sand. "You can live here, in the apartment above the restaurant. It's beautiful, you can hear the ocean. Together we can build something amazing." The concept he laid out wasn't just a romantic whim, it was a seemingly perfect business plan. He, Lakshan, would command the kitchen, and he was a truly fantastic cook, a magician with local spices and fresh seafood. His food was the soul of the place. Anna, he explained, would be the brain. She could apply her sharp, methodical mind to elevate the business. She'd build the website, manage the online bookings, streamline the accounting. As a German native, she would be the ultimate symbol of trust for the European tourists they wanted to attract. "We complement each other brilliantly," he beamed at her. "You bring the management know-how, and I know the local business. We will have the best restaurant on the entire South Coast." Anna was floating. It felt like every broken piece of her life had suddenly clicked into place. Love, a meaningful career, a home with an ocean view, it was everything she had ever yearned for, all presented to her in one perfect package. The fact that this perfect package came with a couple of, let's call them, complications, seemed minor at the time. Complication number 1, Lakshan was married and had 2 children, but that, he explained with a look of pained sincerity, was only on paper. It was an arranged marriage, he assured her, his hand covering hers. "I love my children more than anything, but my wife, we have not been together for years. She means nothing to me. A divorce," he sighed, "was brutally complicated and expensive in Sri Lanka. It wasn't about him, it was about her." The woman would be left with nothing, a social outcast. "I am a good man, Anna," he argued, looking deep into her eyes. "I cannot be responsible for destroying her life like that. And here's the kicker. His story was plausible. In Sri Lanka, a vast majority of marriages are arranged, and the divorce rate is astonishingly low, not because everyone is blissfully happy, but because of the immense social stigma and legal hurdles. It was the perfect, airtight excuse. Complication number 2 was money. The restaurant, while charming, desperately needed a facelift. The kitchen equipment was practically pre-war, the furniture was worn, and the terrace roof leaked every time it rained. Plus, he confessed, he was behind on rent to his landlord. If we can just get over this one hump, Lakshan promised, his voice full of entrepreneurial fire, this place will print money. Tourists will happily pay more for a beautiful, authentic ambiance. But we need an initial investment to get there. Her brain, the same one that could diagnose a complex fracture from a blurry X-ray, looked at this pile of red flags and somehow concluded, seems perfectly reasonable. Anna was already sold on the dream. Every excuse he offered, every problem he presented as an opportunity, her mind worked overtime to make it fit the narrative she so desperately wanted. This is a powerful psychological trapdoor known as confirmation bias, where our brains actively filter reality, cherry-picking the evidence that supports what we already believe and discarding anything that contradicts it. She wanted to believe Lakshan was a good man trapped in a tough situation, so his refusal to divorce his wife became a sign of his noble character, not a massive, waving red flag. She had about 45,000 euros in savings, but that wouldn't be enough. And then she remembered her life insurance policy. 67,000 euros paid into diligently for decades, a safety net for her old age. She could access it at any time with a small penalty. A lightning bolt went through her. This is it, she thought with a surge of adrenaline. This is my chance to finally invest my money into something real, into my future, into our future. Cashing out the policy was shockingly easy. Within 10 days, the money was hers. She recalled taking a taxi to a bank in Colombo and withdrawing the entire sum in cash. She held the thick stacks of rupees in her hands, the physical weight of her entire professional life. It felt, she said, like the beginning of a brand new life. There is an old mariner's wisdom that says, mistrust a calm sea and a smiling rogue. Anna was so mesmerized by the promise of a calm sea, she never stopped to question the man offering to be her captain. For Lakshan, of course, it was just the beginning of another game he had played dozens of times before. Dr. Michael Schmidt, a cybercrime investigator with the German BKA, explains the pattern perfectly. The scammers work systematically. They identify emotionally vulnerable victims, build trust over weeks, and then comes the pitch. A seemingly perfect business offer. A hotel, a restaurant, a real estate deal, always something tangible, something you can picture, to make the scam feel real. It's a bit like how a pitcher plant lures insects in. It doesn't hunt them. It simply creates an environment so sweet and inviting that the victims willingly climb inside, never noticing how slippery the walls are until it's far too late to climb back out. At first, everything was perfect, deceptively perfect. With Anna's life savings now in Lakshan's hand, the dream began to take physical form. Together, they drove the rattling tuk-tuk to furniture shops, picking out new tables and chairs. They hired local craftsmen to repair the leaky terrace and paint the walls a warm, inviting ochre. They even made a trip to Colombo to invest in a gleaming, professional-grade kitchen setup. Anna, with her meticulous German efficiency, documented every expense, every receipt. The restaurant was transformed. It was beautiful. She built a sleek website, set up social media, and carefully curated their profile on TripAdvisor. And the first reviews started trickling in, glowing with praise for the amazing food and the charming new ambiance. It felt so real, Anna remembered, a painful catch in her voice. We were working side by side every day. I could see the progress, touch it. I truly believed we were building something sustainable, something for our future. And for a few months, the numbers backed up the dream. The restaurant was often fully booked. Tourists loved it. Anna, proudly keeping the books, calculated that they had made a profit of 12,000 euros in their first 3 months. It was working. It was all working. The old saying goes, a fool and his money are soon parted. But a smart, successful person and their money? Well, that just requires a much more elaborate and convincing story. And then, slowly at first, the story began to unravel. The partnership started to feel less like a partnership. Lakshan was constantly away. He was always on his phone, having hushed conversations. The excuses were plausible enough. He was off meeting new fish suppliers, negotiating with beverage distributors, doing marketing in nearby towns. He was supposedly networking, but at that point, he was networking more than a LinkedIn influencer on a triple espresso. He started sleeping at the apartment above the restaurant less and less. When he was there, the warmth was gone, replaced by a cool condescension. He would dismiss her questions, treating her not as a partner, but as a slightly incompetent employee. "Anna, you don't understand how things work here," he'd say with a wave of his hand. "Just focus on the guests." The control tightened. He had a network of local friends who seemed to report her every move back to him. If she went for a walk on the beach alone, he'd later ask her who she was meeting. It was less friendly neighborhood watch and more creepy KGB book club. And then there was the money. Her money. It had all been deposited into a business bank account to which only he had access. The taxes, he had explained patiently, as if to a child. In Sri Lanka, it's very complicated. As a foreigner, it's impossible for you to open a business account. This is just safer for us. And so Anna, the woman who had managed hospital budgets, now had almost no cash to her name. She was a prisoner in her own paradise, completely dependent on him for every small thing. She was right back where she never wanted to be again, alone, isolated, and reliant on a man who was growing colder by the day. After 8 long months of the slow-motion train wreck, she couldn't ignore the screaming siren in her gut anymore. The discrepancy between his words and his actions, between the man she fell in love with and the man who now treated her with such disdain, was too vast. The breaking point arrived on a humid Thursday evening. She needed to buy a few personal things and asked Lakshan if she could take 500 euros from the business account. He exploded. His face, once so gentle, twisted into a mask of rage. "This is our business money," he yelled, his voice echoing in the small apartment. "You cannot just tap into our capital whenever you feel like it." Anna was stunned, speechless for a moment. "Our money?" she finally stammered, the absurdity of the situation hitting her like a physical blow. "Lakshan, that is my money. That is my life insurance." His response was swift and brutal. He slapped her, hard, across the face. The sound of it seemed to suck all the air out of the room. The sting on her cheek was nothing compared to the shock that jolted through her. "You do not respect me," he snarled. "In my country, women treat their men with respect." And in that ugly, violent moment, the dream didn't just crack. It shattered into a million pieces. "I saw it with perfect clarity," she recalls. "This man did not love me. He had never loved me. He saw me only as a bank." The slap was the final, ugly punctuation mark on a sentence that had been writing itself for months. What Anna was experiencing is a pattern experts on intimate partner violence call coercive control. It is a calculated strategy of domination that goes far beyond physical violence, encompassing financial abuse, isolation from support systems, psychological degradation, and constant monitoring. The physical assault is rarely the beginning. It is often merely the brutal confirmation that all other forms of control are firmly in place. The flight back to Germany was a blur of emotional chaos. She confessed later that she was, impossibly, still deeply in love while simultaneously being completely ruined, humiliated, and betrayed. It's a hallmark of a trauma bond, that toxic, confusing attachment to an abuser. Back in Germany, the real struggle for survival began. Her apartment was gone, her practice dissolved, her money vanished. She found refuge on the couch of her friend, the one who had stored the few remaining boxes of her old life. She started taking whatever work she could find, becoming a medical gun for hire, a temp doctor in understaffed, overwhelmed clinics. "I felt like a complete failure," she says. "Everyone would ask, 'How could you have been so naive?' But not a single person asked, 'How are you doing?'" Back in the sterile functionality of Germany, Anna fought to piece her life back together. But the ghost of Sri Lanka haunted her. It wasn't just the memory of Lakshan's smile or the sting of his hand. It was the gaping, unanswered questions. How could a profitable business just vanish? Where did all that money, her money, actually go? The shame was a constant, heavy cloak, but underneath it a different feeling began to smolder. The cold, hard anger of a surgeon who needs to understand the pathology. After a year of grueling temp work and relentless saving, she had enough for one more plane ticket. I needed clarity, she explained. It wasn't about love anymore. I had to understand the system that broke me. The Roman philosopher Seneca once wrote that travel and change of place impart new vigor to the mind. For Anna, this trip wasn't about finding vigor. It was about performing a painful but necessary autopsy on a dead dream. What she found robbed her of her breath. She went back to Hikaduwa, back to their restaurant. It was still there, but under new management. Lakshan had sold it. Just like that, the business she had poured her soul and life savings into, sold without her knowledge or consent. She managed to track down a former employee who told her the story. Lakshan was broke, he'd said. Broke? Anna was baffled. How? We were making a profit. The place was packed. The answer was as brutal as it was simple. There had never been a contract between them. No partnership agreement, no legal documents, just a verbal promise made in good faith. On paper, she had just given him a very, very generous gift. She had signed more legally binding documents to get a German library card than she had to hand over her entire life. The most devastating blow, however, came by pure chance. While sitting in a cafe, trying to process the sheer scale of her own naivety, she overheard a woman at the next table speaking German with a familiar accent of frustration. Anna introduced herself. The woman's name was Bianca from Munich. As they talked, a horrifying sense of déjà vu washed over Anna. Bianca's story was nearly identical. A charming man named Lakshan, a promising restaurant project, a life savings gone. The only difference was that Bianca's story had taken place 2 years before Anna's. We just sat there on the beach comparing notes. Anna recalled, the memory still chilling her. It was ghostly. Even his words of love, his pet names, they were identical. He was recycling the same lines, word for word. He was running a franchise of heartbreak with a standardized script for maximum efficiency. Bianca, it turned out, knew of other women. A whole shadow network of the betrayed began to reveal itself. There was Petra from Hamburg, Claudia from Vienna, Sophie from Zurich, all with the same story, all scammed by men from the same coastal village. Anna began to dig, applying her surgeon's precision to dissecting the scam. What she uncovered wasn't a series of isolated crimes, but a perfectly organized, multi-generational industry. Dr. Schmidt of the BKA confirms this is a common model. One village network specializes in German-speaking women, another targets Swedes, another Italians. They know the cultural codes, the language, the specific national longings. The process is chillingly systematic. Young men are recruited and trained by veteran scammers. They learn German pleasantries, the specific hopes and dreams of European women of a certain age. Potential victims, often solo female travelers, are identified on beaches, in hotels, and particularly at Ayurveda retreats, where they are at their most open and vulnerable. The love bombing phase is intense and swift. Then comes the business proposal, always with an emotional hook. I can only do this with you. Once the money is secured, a systematic process of draining every last cent begins. Savings, insurance policies, sometimes even loans taken out in the victim's name. And when the money runs out, the victim is disposed of, often with a sudden, brutal finality. This isn't just a con, it's a refined economic strategy. This is eerily similar to a type of long con fraud investigators call pig butchering, a term that refers to the practice of fattening up a pig before slaughter. The scammers fatten their targets with love and promises before financially butchering them. Lakshan wasn't a lone wolf. He was a cog in a machine. Anna wasn't a singular fool. She was the target of an industry. The realization, Anna said, was both liberating and shattering. Liberating because I finally understood I wasn't just stupid, and shattering because I saw just how calculated and evil the whole system is. How do people do this? It's a process sociologists like Albert Bandura identified as moral disengagement. By reframing the act, they are rich, they can afford it. Diffusing responsibility, everyone else is doing it, and dehumanizing their targets, they are just lonely tourists. Entire communities can participate in acts of profound cruelty while preserving their own self-image as good people. Anna discovered that Lakshan had a severe gambling addiction and had burned through her 67,000 euros in the casinos of Colombo in under 6 months. She learned that entire families are complicit, with mothers playing the part of the concerned matriarch to lend credibility. She learned that the local police were often bribed to make reports disappear. Trying to get legal justice was like trying to nail jello to a tree. She knew she would never get her money back, but she could do something else. I'm not going to court, she decided. I'm going into education. Today, Anna is back in Germany. The life she leads now is not the one she had before, nor is it the one she dreamed of on that beach in Sri Lanka. It is a third life, one forged in the fires of betrayal and rebuilt with the hard-won wisdom of experience. She works as a trauma therapist, specializing in helping the very people who have fallen into the same trap she did. Her office in Berlin is full, a testament to the quiet epidemic sweeping through our lonely, hyper-connected world. The demand for her unique insight, her lived empathy is growing dramatically. She says that the pandemic created the perfect storm, a crucible of isolation and online interaction that allowed these deceptions to flourish like never before. Her own experience, the depth of her suffering, has become her greatest tool in helping others heal. The process of forgiving, she admits, was a long and arduous battle fought within her own heart over many years. But she won. I have made my peace with it, she says, with a quiet strength. I can look at Lakshan's Facebook profile today. He is, by the way, back at it, marketing himself as a restaurant consultant, and I feel nothing but a distant pity for him. Her story, which she painstakingly processed in a private journal, became her therapy. The act of writing it all down, she says, hurts once more, but it is a cleansing pain, one that ultimately heals. Romance scam is the plague of the 21st century, Anna believes, but it is curable, not with medicine, but with awareness, with understanding, and with the profound knowledge that you are not foolish and you are not alone. Her journey from ruin to recovery stands as a quiet, powerful testament that even after the most devastating deception, it is possible to find your way back to yourself, not by erasing the scars, but by understanding what they have taught you.